Welcome to Leadership for Startups, where we help entrepreneurs and leaders build businesses that grow and flourish. My name is Toyo Shumbi, your host. Welcome to episode 19. Today, my guest is Joanna Abeyie. Joanna has been a journalist, a broadcaster, a unique individual that has won numerous awards across a number of fields. She has been acknowledged as an influencer in the UK, especially in the area of diversity and inclusion. She's currently the founder and CEO of diversity and inclusion consultancy business Blue Moon. Jo, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Toye.
Well, it's a pleasure. I'm sure we're going to learn a lot from you. You've got I could have continued with your sort of resume of just talking all about all the great things that you've done, but you've transitioned over the years from a journalist to where you are today. So maybe let's just start there, a snapshot of how you even got involved in journalism in the first place.
Yeah, so growing up, it was the thing that I was interested in, really. I used to like reading magazines. I used to like watching Michael Parkinson on a Friday, doing interviews. And so it was the kind of obvious route to take, really, because it was where my interest lied. So I started off doing some work experience when I was in sixth form. And then as I kind of went on that journey of doing work experience while studying, I noticed, one, that it was definitely the career I wanted to go into, certainly at that time. But I also noticed that there was like a real lack of diversity, and at that point I was more focused on class. It felt really underrepresented in terms of class. And me coming from a sort of low income home, I thought it was, I guess, it was evident it was going to be more difficult for people from low income homes to join the sector, because so much of it was back then about sort of free work experience. I persevered, and I kind of just had to make lots of sacrifices in order to kind of stay and compete with others that probably had it slightly easier in terms of being able to, when I say easier, I just mean in terms of being able to do lots of free work experience, and became a journalist. While I was a full-time journalist, I started my own charity. The first one was Elevation Networks. Elevation Networks wasn't founded by me. It was founded by a gentleman called Samuel Kasumu, who sort of brought together another six or seven of us that formed the Elevation Networks Charitable Trust. They still exist. They still do brilliant work in the area of employment. And it was at that time, it was a youth employment charity, which focused on underrepresented groups. And since then, I believe they've moved from youth employment and grown into kind of middle management, and they still exist. And the whole aim of us then was to try and give sort of young graduates like ourselves the opportunity to have access to jobs, really, and level the kind of playing field. And what we found was, we were in various universities. I was at Reading, some of the guys were at Brunel, others were at Queen Mary, and some were at Imperial. And what we were finding was that, you know, there were students from underrepresented backgrounds that were kind of due to get 2-1s and firsts. But through not having access to the right networks, we're going to be overlooked for opportunities, purely because maybe the right, you know, the kind of employers they'd want to work for don't go to their universities. And we started with universities because back then, it was at the time when university was kind of, the rhetoric at that time was that universities was the route, if you like, for social mobility. And so we knew that we'd be up against businesses that were keen to, for their early careers, take talent that were from the graduate pool. And so I ran that with the guys for about 2 years while being a full-time journalist, and then I set up on my own and focused purely just on the creative industries, because Elevation Networks focused on multiple sectors, so everything from professional services to sort of legal services, and my expertise laid in creative industries, and there's a big enough problem in that. So I set up my own organisation, Shine Media, which focused on trying to bridge that gap between diverse talent and opportunities. I ran that for 8 years, still while working as a news and showbiz and entertainment news journalist. And then in 2016, late 2016, I met the former CEO of S3, Gary Eldon, who we were introduced by someone on my advisory board who explained the work that I was doing around underrepresentation and diversity and inclusion, and was keen to find a way for us to work together. And the way that he felt he could do that was by us launching a brand based on the work I've been doing at Shine Media within his group S3, which is what we did in 2017, called Hayden. And we ran Hayden up until 2000 and end of 2018. Maybe I got the dates wrong, because I think I was at S3 for 2 years, so maybe it's 2016 actually that I joined. And then in 2018, a private investor got in touch with me and said that they would offer a substantial amount of financial investment and coaching resource to help me take the business to the next level. And at that point, it felt like the right thing to do, because the aim of joining S3 really was to try and scale the business so that there was a Hayden in the multiple territories that S3 operates in. And I think that, just in hindsight, based on the way that business is kind of the PLC is kind of structured, it was always going to be quite challenging to do that. So it felt like the right thing to do. And so in 2019, we rebranded Hayden to Blue Moon, which is our current name, and purely because I wanted there to be a bit of a departure from S3, and Hayden had very much become a brand of S3. And so that's where we are now.
Wow, that's a lot. There's a lot there.
Yeah.
So let me dissect it a bit. So obviously you started off in journalism. Is there any reason why you chose the creatives as like an industry to focus on, or segment to focus on?
Yeah, because by this point I was working as a journalist. I could just see it in my own sector so clearly. So I was working in print. I was working in magazines, so women's magazines, for a long time. So the likes of Cosmo and BBC magazines, and then some of the consumer weekly magazines like Closer and Heat and the like. Then I moved into sort of newspapers, so the broadsheet newspapers, and then quickly into radio, and so basically what had happened was I could just see that the more time I spent in that sector, the more I realised that it was an elite business, especially newspapers. So gone were the days, it felt, where people were just curious, joined a local newspaper and got in that way. It felt like everyone was having to take part in these expensive postgraduate courses, which created a barrier for people from low income and low socioeconomic backgrounds. The competition was extremely high, still is. But of course, if you can't afford to do loads of free work experience, you're just totally knocked out of that pool, because in order to get in, that's how you do it. Also, when it comes to writing, the bar is set quite high in terms of grammar, punctuation, and writing style and things like that. And so what we were finding was that people that went to sort of the grammar schools and places like that were just happening to be much stronger writers also. So then there was just so many different disadvantages at play for people, and that's not specific. That's not to say they were the only disadvantages or that those disadvantages apply to everyone, but there were certainly things that were coming up when I spoke to businesses about some of the things I wanted them to engage with me on.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. So it'd be good to extract some of the things that you learned. Obviously, this is leadership for startups, and our audience, what they're trying to figure out is how things that they can learn in their own startup or that they can leverage. So were there any key lessons as well as skills? So there's sort of two questions here. Any key lessons that you learned out of your first venture, especially with Shine Media?
Yeah, I think yeah, there's so many lessons in there. I think with the first one, it was creating a model that people will pay for. And that sounds silly because you think, well, it's a business. Of course, you want to create a model that people will pay for. But actually, it's not as silly as you might think. Because when it comes to sort of diversity and inclusion, it's seen as a nice to have. Back then, anyway, it wasn't necessarily seen as a business imperative. And even now, we've still got that challenge in businesses where they all understand the value of it, but it's not necessarily seen as something that is a priority for a business. So it's about making sure that you create a product within that area that people will consistently pay for. So I'd say thinking about it a bit more broadly and going, so this is a problem that we know businesses face. They have the will, perhaps, and the want to do something about it. They're under resourced and they don't have large budgets to spend on this. So what product could I create in that space that they would be able to spend because they'd see a return of investment, and they would continue to sustain that. And I think that is the key thing
Okay.
to
And
think about in that space.
yeah.
And then I think testing it. So once you've found that product, going out and making sure that people will pay for it. The way to do that is just to start selling it and sounding it out with people who would be the decision makers in those businesses, and getting them to give you feedback on what in that packaging would potentially make it not a sale. And I think if you can do that very early on, and you're in one position, and you're working somewhere, you can really, or even if you've just, if you're working somewhere and you're thinking about moving into another sector, that's a good activity. But if you're kind of literally at that point, or you're at the start of your career and you're at your first thing that you want to do is to start a business, then I think that's really key. And then one thing that I learned a bit later on was putting your profit first. Because sometimes you do enough just to sort of cover what it will cost. And actually, I think you should be thinking about that profit and putting that in from the outset, so that you're constantly building a reserve, if you like. Because the biggest challenge in year one of any business is its cash flow. And I don't think until you experience that journey as a startup, you fully appreciate how much cash flow is king. So I would say those two things are really important. It's finding a product that will sell whatever the weather in the sector that you're trying to service, and then finding a price point or a pricing package or method that will also weather changes in that industry. And if you can find that in the beginning, and start to test that from the beginning, you just protect yourself later for industry changes, I think.
Yeah. Mm. And so, based on that, then, would you are you able to isolate specific skills that you think an entrepreneur needs as they grow their business, especially in the early stages? Would you be able to isolate certain skills and maybe character qualities that's necessary?
Yeah, I would say resilience is hard. So you need a lot of resilience. You need to accept that you need to have resilience and a positive attitude towards learning. What I mean by that is I'm using the word learning rather than what people kind of describe as failure. And the reason I say that is because things don't go to plan. You may think your idea is brilliant and others just don't. And if you're behind it, or they do, and they're just not in the right place to pay for it or buy it. And I think that if it's your own business, if you create it from scratch, it's difficult to not take that personally. And so you need to be resilient, and you need to come up with or arm yourself, I think, your mental health with things that allow you to be able to weather some of the kind of internal conversations that you'll have with yourself. And that will be around, have I, things like, have I got the right business? Like, am I the right person to lead it? And these are questions that you get all the time. What skills are missing? And who should I engage with? And engaging with other people, does that mean that I've failed because I haven't been able to do it myself? And like, these are, you think these are things that, well, clearly, if you want a business and you want it to do well, all the books say, you need people with different strengths and things like that. But finding good people is one of the hardest things to do in starting your business. It's all very well when it's you, but finding people that you can trust to scale it with, that are just as passionate when it's not their baby, it's yours, is probably one of the hardest things to do, and the most time consuming, and one that requires, like, when you find them, it's excellent, but it takes patience. So I'd say you do need a lot of resilience, and there's some of the reasons why. I think you need to be able to create opportunities and a can-do attitude. It can't all be doom and gloom. It can't all be, and when I say that, I mean that when you do get a setback, that a leader needs to be able to go, okay, now what? How do we fix this? It can't be the mindset of, oh, this just isn't fair, and I'm doing everything right, and I keep repeating what I'm saying by saying, it sounds obvious, but until you're actually on that journey, you won't realize how much of this you need, because every day that you're building something, you're taking a risk. You are trying to take something to another level. You're thinking about how to get there. And depending on how ambitious you are with your business, you really, really need a thick skin.
Yeah.
A very thick skin.
And I mean, so when obviously you're talking through experience, so what kind of support did you have, or would you have liked to have in some of these journeys, some of these phases that you've gone through?
I think so. I've had mentors and coaches, and they've been excellent at helping me. Books I've read have been literally like genius for me. They've taught me so much. They've been so helpful for me. And I'd say that that's important. Books like The Chimp Paradox, books like What Got You There Here, sorry, Won't Get You There. Yeah, all these kind of mindset books, and the luxury strategy and profit first and blue ocean strategy. All of those books have really, really helped me to be honest about what it is I'm trying to achieve. And Simon Sinek's Start With Why. That's been brilliant. And his other book, Leaders Eat Last. So all of those books have really, really helped me. I think mentors that are honest with you is really important too. So, saying to them, this is what's going on at the moment. I don't think it's going that well. Here are my areas. I'm worried about this. I'm worried about that. And having someone to say, okay, fair enough. Well, this is why we think it's going that way. These are some of the things that you need to be honest about and change in your business. And these are some of the areas in which you need to get development for yourself. And that's really important. Having somebody who is happy to say, Joanna, you're brilliant at these things, but you need help with these. And, being able to say, if you don't get a hold on this, the business won't grow in the way that you need it to. And just advice from experienced people, like that's super important. And I don't think I think people sometimes underestimate how important having those voices in your ear is.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that's been talked about a lot more now, especially coaching, mentoring, having somebody like a sounding board that can help you to bounce your ideas, give you a different perspective. Because sometimes when you're so close to the business, you might not be able to see things clearly, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Also, being honest about like going along to talks, hearing how other people are doing things is another good way of learning from those that are in experienced positions. And going along, like getting involved in seminars, like Goldman Sachs have a program that you can join where like has a program that you can join where you literally would sign up for different courses, and they take you through everything from sales to scaling. It's just a kind of a business growth seminar. It's all online. You can log in online at home and take part in it yourself, and it gives you activities, and those activities really help you to start thinking about certain elements of the business through these various modules. And it's good because there's a community of professionals who are starting businesses or further along their business journey, and you're all kind of learning individually, but you can connect with each other and things like that. And School for Startups and things, they're all really useful because for example, I started going on to things like that probably when I was about 20, 21, and I'm 32 now, so for a long time. And you get to build a network of entrepreneurs around you, and you watch their businesses grow, and you can learn from each other and you can help each other. So now I've got friends who have gone on from strength to strength. I've had friends that have run businesses that they've closed and started other ones because they weren't the right ones to run for them. And so you just don't feel quite so isolated in the journey.
That's right. Yeah.
And it is a tough one. Especially when you're not just responsible for your own income, but also the income of others.
That's right. Yes, I'm sure. But then when you think about some of your successes, so what have been some of what you would consider to be some great breakthroughs for yourself?
So for a long time, because we're executive search and advisory, for a long time our consultancy piece was just kind of it was businesses taking up that consultancy when they needed it. Now with anything like consultancy, it can completely depend on when people need that activity. So they might say yes today, something else happens within the business, and it means actually we will take that consultancy a bit later on. So unless it's a absolutely urgent need to deal with a current business challenge that is impacting on the bottom line today, consultancy can often be seen as a nice to have. Yeah. And so a breakthrough for us was trying to get to a point where we were on retainers with businesses who sort of embedded us into their business culture and their business delivery, so that one, we had a steady cash flow, but two, so that we could actually see traction and track our impact, and they could track the return on their investment. Now, without the retainers, it doesn't steady the business.
Yeah, the cash flow.
Yeah. So that was a breakthrough for us, finding a way to make sure that every month the business made
coming in.
money.
Yeah. And it's predictable.
Yeah. And that it wasn't a case of some months you're making loads, and because you're making loads of money, it's stretching across for the next couple of months. And then in the other months, there's nothing coming in. So even if you were able to cover the cost for a period of time, just when it comes to writing your cash flow, I mean, actually producing the document that is your cash flow and projections, it's really difficult to do that when you haven't got something retained, when you haven't got signed terms that commit that money coming in. And I'd say that a breakthrough is fine. So that's what I was going back to my point at the beginning. It's finding a product in the area you're passionate about that people will buy repeatedly.
That's it, isn't it? It's finding
And I always say whether the storms of an industry, because as you've seen with Brexit, that's impacted the way people have done business. Politics does that to an organisation. They're ultimately, I'll give you a live example. We were doing huge amount of work with a big retailer, and it was a 6-figure deal, and then they had a huge loss in sales and their own profit, and then that 6-figure deal had to be postponed because the work that they were doing with us had put, and in terms of in the area of recruitment, people and culture, had been the area that had to freeze financially. So the business wasn't feeding that area money until it had seen growth in other areas, which then meant that for us, that piece of work no longer existed. So, and that came about because in that sector, within the retail sector, there was some activities that impacted on the way that on their revenue. So that's what I mean by it. Yeah, that it doesn't. It can be politics. It can be a sector-specific challenge, and those are the things that will make it difficult for a business owner and a startup. And I'm talking about these things in the startup from a startup perspective, because they tend to be the things that fold businesses and see businesses going into administration. It's over optimistic thinking from leaders without the practical and sensible backup of a cash flow and clever accountant that's being really honest with you about how realistic your optimism is.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah.
Yeah, I know you've hit the nail there. That I mean, the startup phase was described as finding your business model. That's what the startup phase is. You're trying to find out who your customers are and how you can consistently find your customers and then grow your customer and then keep your customers. That's the whole startup phase. And because that's the only way you can get traction, and then you can start to build on that. So but there are some key skills like what you just talked about: negotiation skills, sales skills. So out of those kind of skills, Was there any that you found challenging that you needed to learn those specific skills?
Yeah, I think just personally, my nature and my approach to what I was doing has always been purpose driven and passion driven. So, I mean, to begin with, when I first set up the Shine Media, I found it even difficult to charge at all. Because I loved what I was doing. I was just trying to help. And then I had to come to terms with, actually, it's okay to have a business with a values-based business or a purpose-driven business, and charge for that. That doesn't mean that it takes away from your integrity in doing the right thing. Does that make sense? So that was the first lesson. I think the second one was then learning what to give away for free that wasn't going to close the opportunity to actually do further work with that person. So to try and make sense of that, for example, if being someone that's very passionate about this area of inclusion and equity for everybody, you could be called multiple times a day for advice on this, for companies small and large that are trying to also find a way to navigate that space. Now, if you really care, the chances are you'll just go straight into giving advice without realizing that that's your service, that's your expertise. And so if you give too much away in the beginning, there's no need for them to continue to use you. In fact, one of my business partners in the past said to me, he used to call it the brain drain, where they would bring you in for a meeting and drain your brain of all its ideas,
And then
not
they'll
have
say
to
thank you
pay
very
for it,
much.
and then say thank you and use it. And so, so I think a lesson was in remembering that my knowledge in my head is my currency. My ideas were my currency, that they had to have a price, and they had to be valued because they were valued by that person. They just weren't wanting to pay for it. And I had to have the confidence to say, no, you will pay for that. It will be a cost to you, that value. And then to get to a point where you're confident enough to say no to things that just don't serve that. So sometimes through wanting to work with a particular brand because you're either passionate about that brand or you've followed that brand for a long time, you might start giving away some things that for any or in any other circumstance you wouldn't do. And it's about saying, and people might go, well, should we don't have a budget of this much, we do have a budget of this, and it's about having the confidence to say no to that, and say, okay, great, but come back to us when you have the budget that meets our costings, and or saying, having the confidence to say, well, in which case we can only offer you A and B rather than A, B, C, and D, for that amount. And all of that is learning on the job. And there's a saying in sales which is always be closing. And I think there is an art to closing. And some ways to get around that are, who is the decision maker? Who do they need to look good to? Because in short, for employees, they are depending on what kind of structure they're in, but they are measured on their delivery. They are incentivized on their delivery. So, bonuses and things like that. So it's finding out who is the decision maker that's able to give you the money that you would require to run the service that you'd like. Who though do they need to impress? What will impressing that person look like for them? So not only speaking to that piece when you sell, but also delivering to that when you then go about the actual activity, and looking at what could become a challenge, for you, closing that person, predicting it beforehand, and putting a sort of contingency in place, so that when you do have those conversations, you've organised it.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good, and it is. You're right in terms of the whole process that you have to think through. Are you speaking to the right person, etc. And also what you mentioned about valuing your service. Most of us are knowledge workers, and we're not necessarily all creating apps and things like that. So it is turning that intellectual property, isn't it, into a value proposition that is exchanged, for currency. So that does take it's a mindset shift to understand that that's what we offer, and we see every day. Some consultants would not pick up a pen or do anything until you've declared what what their value is. Some people just
and until you've signed the terms, unless there's a signed terms in my inbox, I won't do any activity. And also you'll know this as well, Toya. Like a lot of people, it doesn't matter whether you're selling light bulbs, pens, or people in terms of sort of talent or culture change or concepts. It doesn't matter. A lot of people will say, yeah, I'd love to do that. Well, when can we start? And quite literally the very next day, unfortunately, something's changed, and so you have to be able to expect it, be fine with it, not take it personally, and do all you can to manage that. So terms get signed before we have a conversation, for example, any sort of advisory conversation. Perhaps that's a suggestion. I'm not saying that that's what I do, but just perhaps that's a way of doing it. But it's just constantly thinking about how can I put these things in place to prevent me having repeat scenarios in this way.
Yes. So obviously you have started Blue Moon, so what are some of your aspirations as well as some of the challenges that you're facing as you're growing this new business?
So it's one of the things that I like is one of our strap lines is, well, so it's Blue Moon, and we say create Blue Moon. It's not as rare as you think. And then we say we change places, not people. So the point is that I want, what I've always wanted, is for businesses, organizations, however you want to kind of term them, to provide everybody with what it is that they need to be successful. And we don't start from that place at the moment. Now, there are lots of things that my business can't solve. It can't solve all of the world's problems, but it can help businesses to be responsible and ethical in their contribution to some of those challenges. So, when we think about underrepresented groups, all of those areas have complex societal challenges. The education system they go through, the parenting they receive, the network they have access to, like the list goes on and on and on, right? So there'd have to be huge societal structural changes in order for me to level out all of those things, which I can't do alone. Governments for years haven't been able to do that. Yeah. But what we can do is we can get businesses to think about the role they play in that. And so that's why I say we change places, because I think when we talk about talent, we say diverse talent. And that just literally diverse just means different. So when we say diverse talent, businesses still go, we have a talent team, and then we've got someone who's coming to specifically work on diverse talent. And I always say, and I've been criticized for it and I'll take it, but I always say it's just talent. Like, we shouldn't be, talent is talent. Toye has talent because Toye has his talent. Toye is not shouldn't be treated as a totally different type of talent because of the color of his skin, his age, his sexual orientation, his faith, and for so long the majority have been, if we look at the report, Elitist Britain, that came out by the Social Mobility Commission, it says, all of the leaders in our country were literally still in the percentages of like late 80s to 90% are grammar school or privately educated, Eton kind of graduates through to the Oxbridge or Ivy League. Then they go into either the mayoral roles within the city. They join the biggest law firms. They join the biggest banks. They join politics. So essentially that majority ends up running the country. Now, because that is the majority, it's really complex what I guess I'm trying to land here. But because that is the majority, we see anybody else as diverse talent, as like as different talent, and they are, in that they're not the white elite male. And I'm saying elite rather than middle class, because you and I would probably be middle class. And so would a white working class kid who's now, achieved something that's taken him into this bracket of middle class, right? So I'm talking about the elite. And I guess where I get slightly frustrated is what I'm asking businesses to do is that if they provide equity, so if they look at their procedures, their processes in hiring, in attracting, in recruiting, in promoting and developing talent, they don't need to call it diverse. It would be inclusive. So, for example, if I had a disability, I should be able to start the race as much as possible. Or if I'm an ethnic minority, or if I'm a woman, or if I am of different sexual orientation, I should, if the business has equipped the recruitment process and the attraction process with the right tools and processes, we should all have what we need to successfully compete and apply for those jobs. So then talent is what is awarded.
Yeah.
Do you know where I'm?
I know where you're going. I think I do.
Yeah. So at the moment, we have processes that favour a particular group of people, and then rather than admit that, we say we need to find diverse talent, which really just means those that are protected by the Equality Act 2010. And that fall under those 9 protected characteristics. And I think the bigger problem is we need to make our processes inclusive. And then we would attract talent. And that talent would organically come from diverse places. At the moment, you make it easier for particular groups to get through the process. So I think the bigger challenge to businesses is to change the places and not the people. There's nothing wrong with that disabled person or that black man or woman or Asian man or woman. They're all there with the talent. They've got that. What they're not able to access is your processes, because they're not accessible to all. They don't give everybody what they need in order to be successful. Now, for example, to break that down, if I am that person who has graduated out of Eton, gone on to Oxford or Cambridge, come from a long line of family members who have done the same. So we have cultural capital as as well as wealth, then I'm going to sometimes through my own fault, perhaps not always through my own fault, I'm going to think that the best talent comes from those places.
Yes, that does happen.
So I'm going to hire in that image because that's all I know.
That's all you know. Yeah.
That's what I've defined as good in my mind. So if I then join a business that says, okay, that's fine if that's what you've been exposed to, but for us, the way we do things in this place is that talent for us is everywhere, in all communities and in all groups. So we have created a talent attraction strategy, a recruitment strategy, a promotion and development strategy that speaks to that. So you're going to have to do something about the bias that you might hold because it doesn't fit with our strategies. And that's what I mean by we change places, because we're not there, there's nothing wrong with that person's experiences. They're of value, of course they are, but it shouldn't mean that because that's a value, we can no longer have talent in any other areas. We've got to completely dismiss that. We can't do that. And in this piece around equality, it's not taking equality from one person and giving it to another. It's trying to level it all so that everybody feels that they have what they need to be successful in those processes. And if they don't get the role, they just weren't right for that role. And that can be the argument. But at the moment, there is so much opportunity for people to say, is it that I wasn't right for the role, or is it that you don't get me? Or is it that I wouldn't fit in with the culture here?
The culture,
the culture this place has created, if you like.
Well, I mean, that's the one area that I was at. A few months ago, I ran a networking event with some colleagues, and in doing that, there was an activity where I got members of the audience to simply just talk about having conversations with strangers, and also having conversations with people around them. And then I remember somebody actually just sharing about how even in her own workplace, she mentioned that she found it uncomfortable speaking to senior management, and it came out that was because they were predominantly of a certain type, which were, and so she didn't feel like there was this bridge between this whole her sort of kind of working environment and this group's working environment. So this is something that I've seen, not in some situations anyway, where what they would then say, even if you go out and hire these people, that they might say they don't feel comfortable because there's not enough of them in the organization that makes them feel welcomed, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, totally. And that just doesn't surprise me at all, to be completely honest. And one of the things as well is, like, the reason I like that person had the confidence to say that is because sometimes it's a huge elephant in the room and no one says anything. So for example, one of my consultants who focuses on disability always says, saying that you're an equal opportunities employer and saying, all of our jobs are on our website. So if you wanted to work here, you go to our website and you apply fair and square, and successful applications get through. And we wouldn't know anything about you apart from what you've said in this application form. Well, like, if your website's not accessible, like, and I can't use a mouse, how have you made it equal for me to apply? If you use algorithms that are to collect buzzwords or keywords from applications to sieve out the good from the not so good, but those algorithms and those kind of keywords are based on a vocabulary that certain people just don't use. How have you provided me with what I need? And an example of that is I've been hired by a broadcaster for years and years and years and paid by them. And I have never successfully got through their application process. But I've worked with them over 10 years.
You work with them. Okay.
Do you see what I mean? So sometimes these things are, the will is there and they attempt to be equal. But unless you are in the shoes of somebody trying to get through that process, and you are them, you're not going to understand what their barriers are. So the reason I always say that it never even gets raised is it doesn't get raised because it's just not in your mind, because you're only thinking from your own experiences. So, and what we need to do more of when it comes to this agenda is look beyond our own. So when I started Shine, I thought about it from a class perspective, because being a mixed heritage, having a black father, a white mother, from totally, like my dad from Ghana, from West Africa, from completely different places, my mum from Windsor in England, like that was that, and nobody, like, if you like, the two most important people in my life didn't look like me. So I wasn't socialized to need that in order to empathize, to relate, to love, to care. That wasn't required. As a baby, the two people that look after me do not look like me, right? So that's not what I was taught. But so when I went into the workplace, it wasn't always the thing that I thought about straight away. The ethnicity, the representation of an ethnic minority, and seeing that. But where I could see a huge disadvantage was where, if you did not know the right people, if you grew up in a council estate like the one I grew up in, and you went to the school that was local to that council estate, your parents worked their socks off and tried their best, to do everything to get you through your education, but they don't know, especially if you're, like, my dad came over to the UK in 1974, so all of his qualifications from Ghana all of a sudden meant nothing here. They do, and like many of that generation, they do the jobs that they need to do to keep the family fed and homed, and housed, and then they go back and they try and study once they've steadied the home, right? So for those people, they're not going into businesses and buildings where they're building up those connections that would create this social mobility. They're going into jobs where they're surrounded by other people like them who are doing similar jobs for similar reasons. So, when I talk about this, like, piece around social class, it's because I'm talking about the access to information, to network, to cultural capital that you just don't get. So when I first started, I was thinking about it from that perspective. Who is being excluded from this industry because they just don't know the right people? Because we all get free education. That's a benefit, right? So as long as we work hard at that, we can get good grades and we can compete. But if I don't write in the same way when I fill out the application form for my first job, then I'm not going to get. You're not going to see how great I am, because you've set up a system that works against the way I speak.
Yeah,
or the words I use. Do you see what I mean? So that's the point that I'm making with that. And when I say we've got to turn on its head the way we think about diverse talent, it's not a kind of Noah's Ark. We've got 2 women, we've got 2 black people, we've got 2 Muslim, so we're fine. It's how do we keep our organisation in a place where we're giving everyone what they need? And how do we do that? We have to ask those people what the barrier is. What do we not do at the moment that excludes them?
Well, it's definitely it's a huge topic, but obviously, if we have entrepreneur startups, that's a good place to start. So you're obviously very passionate about this, without a doubt. That's all right. No. Come on, go for it. How can people get in touch with you to take this this thinking to a practical level, if people want to get in touch with you?
I'm on all social media platforms as Joanna Abeyie, so Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all of those places. We also have a website called www.createbluemoon.co.uk.
Okay.
And you can contact us there. We also have on the LinkedIn, you also have our brochure, which you can download and have a read of, and ask any questions also. So,
okay, brilliant. So we'll definitely have all that information in the show notes as well. So just as we sort of begin to wrap up, so what current challenges are you facing as you're sort of taking your business to that next level or beyond?
what are the challenges I'm facing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it is. It's a couple of things. So I'd say, right now in this very moment, it is thinking about what I also want personally, and marrying that with a startup business and what that takes. So the challenge at the moment for me is trying to find the right balance between knowing if I guess like deciding at what point I'll know that this business is going to is going to last the test of time. Obviously, we've got 3 years. We've just got through our first year. So I just want to. I'm trying to get it to 3 years so that it's like what you said at the top of the conversation, Toya, around you start a business, don't you? And then you want to check that you can grow it. You want to be confident that that is a realistic plan. And so we've only just got through year 1 of Blue Moon, and so my next sort of focus is making year 2 a steady one and putting profits at the forefront so that it gets us through to year 3, and then we've kind of hopefully we're on an even footing, and we've stabilized. I think it is finding a focus. So now that we've worked out in year 1 what sells, what doesn't, it's then building on that focus. So now that we've worked that out, what additional things can we do to add value to that? And that's another one. And I think it's also at the moment we have a model where we've got lots of consultants, we have lots of third supplier relationships and partnerships. And the question is, do we continue in that way? And there's lots of businesses. There's another business that I admire and has done extremely well that are based on that model, where they just have a host of consultants that specialize in this area. And it's whether I go down that road or whether I think about turning this small team, so less than 5 with 6 sort of contractors, into a permanent team of 10 or 15 people. And that's the kind of crossroads I'm at the moment. And just on another note, something I just wanted to add actually is what I'm finding now is that there are lots of young entrepreneurs who are winning lots of awards for various things. And now these awards are business related awards. They are, in some cases, Queen's Honours. They are, and do you know what it does? It is brilliant. It's good profiling. But there is something to be very mindful of, and that is that with those awards and accomplishments, you are propelled into a space sometimes of where the only way is up.
Okay.
And sometimes,
and when you say the only way is up, is that in terms of the pressure?
yeah,
Okay.
to keep at that level of accomplishment and achievement year on year on year. And what that can do in a startup world is it's brilliant because it motivates you, it keeps you striving for the next thing. But certainly in my journey and some of the journeys of my peers, it can also add an unhealthy pressure. And what I just wanted to say on that was that business is up and down. It always is. And if you read the book Profit First, even some of the most respected, reputable, long-standing businesses are 2 months away from failure based on their cash flow.
Cash flow, yeah.
So
that's why they say cash is king, isn't it?
Cash is king. So it is important that you have a healthy attitude to business, and that you win some and you lose some. And sometimes saying that when your livelihood depends on it, when other people's, like for me, I've got to make sure that people are paid on time every month. Other people's livelihood depends on it. And depending on the size of your business, lots of money can be involved in that, and relationships. And so you've just got to take some of that, though, with a pinch of salt, because when you're working so independently, your mind can play a lot of tricks on you, which is why I think it's important to build a little community around you of people that are doing similar things, because otherwise it can feel as if you're the only one going through it. You take it personally as if it's your own failure, rather than some lessons you just need to learn, and that everyone learns on that business journey. And the more you start going, it's been a tricky year, everyone goes, oh my goodness, yeah, tell me about it. Or they'll go, I remember that was our first year, and you know what we did this, and then we started to see some changes. Do you know what I mean? And like, the more you're honest about the realistic experience, which is why when I do any interviews like this, I try to be so honest about it, because there's social media out there going like, oh, we're great, like, I'm an entrepreneur, I've won this award, I've won that award, I sit on this board, I sit on that board, yeah, everything's amazing. And you have no idea like what it's actually taking, do you know what I mean, to keep that business going. And so I just want to put that out there, that your health has to come first in this, and that you can put an unhealthy amount of pressure on yourself when you're constantly getting awards or applauded for things. Because then when you get to a moment like, I'm 32 now, I've been on my entrepreneurial journey since I was 18. So you get to 32 and you kind of go, well, what do I want to do? What am I happy doing this still? Am I being fulfilled by this? Is this the right time in my life to be scaling a business? Like, if I want to do lots of other things as well, personally and in my life. And then I think when you start to do that, you need to have the space to be honest with yourself. But if you've bought into the pressure that other people have placed on you because you've shared loads on your social media, your LinkedIn's full of all your accolades and accomplishments, it's unhealthy amount of pressure. And when I first started my business, there wasn't even Facebook. It was just about coming. It was just, I think it was just starting. So no one really knew it. So I had a completely different attitude. Do you know what I mean? I was just getting on. It didn't even, like, everyone just got on. It didn't need to go anywhere, or like in terms of a platform. You just needed to do your job. Like, there was nowhere to put it. It was kind of like good old fashioned newsletters. It wasn't this constant by the minute sort of update.
Yeah.
And then you look at other businesses and you're comparing yourself. Well, they're doing this. Should I be doing this? Should I be thinking about that? And then, so just want to, I guess a key message in that is, I really want everyone who wants to start out on their journey to be as successful as possible. And the only way to do that, irrespective of all the clever ways and people that you get around you, to help you to build that business, you need to look after your well-being and manage the pressure and expectations that you have on yourself. And that needs to be a priority every day on top of your business goals.
Yes. No, brilliant. No, thank you. Thank you so much, Jo. Yeah, I mean, that's been some fantastic sound advice. I think we're going to have to wrap it up here, but we can go on forever.
Yeah.
But again, as I mentioned, that you can contact Jo at, the details will be on the show notes, but in particular, createbluemoon.com, the website where you can find out more information, especially in this area of inclusion inclusivity, inclusion, diversity. As you can hear, she's very passionate about it, and rightly so. And I do believe that there's a lot of talent out there that can help support your business. It's just an issue of knowing where to find them and how to find them. And definitely Jo can support you on that. Jo, I want to thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, being very honest, being very real. And I really like the fact that you're right. This is tough. Resilience is needed. All ideas don't just, it's not Hollywood.
Yeah,
Building a business takes a lot of tenacity, a lot of resilience, a lot of trial and testing. And there was a particular choice of word you used, which I appreciated. You said that it's not failure, it's learning. And John Maxwell calls it failing forward. So that you're picking up new ways of doing it, even though it might not be working out initially. So I want to thank you so much for sharing all this with us. You're welcome.
Pleasure.
And yes, and so listeners, thanks for joining us. As I mentioned, you can find Jo's details on the show notes, as well as createbluemoon.com and any other resources that's been mentioned as well. But for now, to your success, and speak to you soon. Thank you.